Well, restaurants, robots, and chaos. This was the experience I've had with a certain system made by a lovely man named Dave Arneson. Now, Dave Arneson, I think that's his name. Essentially, he created a system for Cosmic Mirror games that unfortunately never went past its alpha phase version. Now, this game system was a horror based game system that was inspired by the video game series Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm sure you're familiar with it. If you're not, well, then what are you doing with in life? Okay, that was a joke, of course. So yeah, I found this system and was very interested in it because something I like to do in my free time on weekdays is I like to study tabletop RPG systems, and I also am a really big fan of Five Nights at Freddy's, so it was like match made in heaven, and it's free on a Google Doc on Reddit. Like, I yeah, count me in, count me in. I'm taking this. I'm taking this. And yeah, first session I ever did with it was with a very big group. Like, I think there was like 8 to 10 people, and it was chaos. It was really difficult keeping them on track. It was like all the things like yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult. It was a struggle, but I had fun. I learned a lot of lessons about being a game master from that thing, and yeah. Now, this wasn't the first time I ever did a tabletop RPG campaign session inspired by Five Nights at Freddy's. The first one I ever did was actually using Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition rules, but in a super limited capacity with my best friend. It was a one-on-one campaign, and it was basically more of a mini series than a substantial campaign. Like, I believe we only did 3 sessions of this campaign, so yeah, it was pretty short. But in that, he basically played through the events of the Five Nights at Freddy's games, but with his impact as a character. And it was very interesting. He played a Asian dude from Florida that was a felon. It was pretty funny. And it's funny that I actually found this system way before I roleplayed this, but I was more familiar with the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition system, so I just decided to roleplay him in that. And it was fun. It was really fun. I had a lot of fun with it. Like, if you guys ever want to know like the personal story of that campaign, put it in the comments below. But anyways, it was a system that was the system I found on Pepper. Come here, Pepper. So basically, it was the system I found on Reddit. It was very it fit thematically with FNAF, so it didn't feel like I got scammed. Like, it felt very well made and very well put together. Like, there was nothing about it that I really disliked other than it was a D6 system and not something I was really familiar with at the time. But then I started to learn more about this system and eventually would host a game session of it. Yeah, it went pretty well. Now, I say pretty well, but I just mentioned earlier that it was pretty chaotic. But I learned a lot of lessons. Like I said, I learned a lot of lessons as a GM. So then that brings me up to the most recent session I have played. It was a much smaller group, only I think 5 people, and very self-contained story. So basically, in this campaign I made, because this first session was sort of a pilot session for an actual play I was going to make, but unfortunately the camera didn't record anything, or it stopped recording, and what was recorded unfortunately didn't save to the file. So that sucked, but I still had fun because this campaign, this group in this campaign actually took this seriously. So or at least as seriously as they could. And that worked out pretty well. So the system, I should probably explain, is like I just said, it was made by Dave Arnson. I don't really know who that guy really is, but he made the system, so shout out to Dave. It uses the six-sided dice. Sorry for that weird cut there. My dog was going ballistic. Anyways, what I was saying is, oh yeah, the system. The system was made by Dave Arnson for a publishing company called Cosmic Mirror Games. At least that's what the system said. It may have been phony. I don't know. But essentially, it was only ever, from what I could find on the internet, it's only in its first alpha phase, which means the project probably never got that far. And according to Dave, he wanted to actually talk to Scott Cawthon about officially licensing the TTRPG, but in his own words, he's a hard man to track. So I guess that means he never he probably tried to contact Scott, but Scott never got back to him. And come to think of it, he probably wouldn't have wanted the system to be released so soon, anyways. Like this system released like I believe it was 2018 because like it mentions sister location animatronics, but it doesn't use its stats. Like, and that's how you can tell this was an alpha build because it only used animatronics. It only made stats for the animatronics from games 1 to 3. But it still mentioned animatronics from FNAF 4, sister location, and so on. So yeah, that's a little weird, but whatever. And unfortunately, yeah, that's all we've ever heard of it. And I guess I should just go into more detail about the mechanics. So you got a GM or a game master, or in this case, a general manager. That's what the GM in this context of the game would be. So the GM would be very like I don't really know the word to describe it, but basically the GM would be like any dungeon master, any GM in particular. He would control the animatronics. He would also control like how certain locations worked and stuff like that. So yeah, and he would probably also write the storyline because this was an alpha build, there was no like example storyline. So I had to basically make up this entire like like TTRPG Bible, for lack of a better phrase. Basically, all my notes. It was my notes essentially. So I had to write those notes, and I would try to make the story along with my players. That's how I did it, at least. You can definitely do it differently. And the system itself functions like a D6 version of Call of Cthulhu. It involved a lot of so you have like 6 main like attributes. And these attributes include might, finesse, toughness, might, finesse, toughness, intellect, that was one of them, perception, and I believe focus was one of them. I don't know. I'm probably getting that wrong. Link for the system will be in the description below. Uh, yeah, you got those 4 main attributes and tons of smaller attributes that contribute to your other smaller abilities that are scaled on numbers 1 to 5, whereas the top ones are scaled from numbers 1 to 3. And you will and you would basically roll whatever the GM would require of you. Sorry for that weird cut there. basically you would roll what is required of your GM. For instance, if you wanted to like swim underwater, you'd probably have to roll like a toughness, and on your like bottom abilities, you would need like maybe roll a speed. Except you would only roll one. You would only roll normally one dice, but you would add the modifiers from both of those abilities to your roll so you can succeed on the difficulty. And there are, I believe, 5 difficulties. And they all have a number that corresponds to that difficulty. I don't know them at the top of my head, but basically you want to have to beat that thing, that difficulty, whether it's a situation or in combat / survival scenarios in animatronic. So that is what's required. There is combat in the system if you are interested in like using combat for it, but it's like the game isn't made with combat in mind. If you're gonna do like a combat heavy FNAF campaign, I recommend just using either Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition or the D20 system. One of those two would probably work. Or you can use Call of Cthulhu, but like the D20 version of Call of Cthulhu, which is arguably a lot more like worked out for like fighting and stuff. And lastly, we're probably like how you can make your character like you know how in most like tabletop RPGs you got your class and your race. Well, in this you have your role and your reason. So your role is like how you exist in society, basically. Like, are you just a normal adult that has an adult basically functions as like an other race? Like if you don't have any of the other, if you're not a part of any of the other roles in the role table, adult is likely what you're going to be. You could also play as a child. You could play as teen, which has several different variants of it that you can choose, but you could just play as a normal teen if you want to, of course. You could play as a night or day guard to the said location that everyone's going to, and you can have different rules and reasons for why you're going to that location. Did I say rules and reasons? I just meant role. I meant reason. Dang it. Anyway, so your reasons are less important. Like where your roles will give you like certain abilities, like independent, animal friend, that impact like your gameplay. For instance, in independent, if you're doing something by yourself, you can roll twice. Add the number of those 2 rolls together with whatever ability score you have, so you can like do a lot of good things by yourself. Like you could probably take out a lot of animatronics by yourself if you had the independent and maybe like precise shooter. Because yes, there are guns in this system, so that's fun. And as I said before, sorry for the side tangent. Your roles are less important. They don't really give you abilities, as I just said. They're just more so to give your character like backstory, essentially. Really, it's just to give you a reason as to why you're even interested in this location in the first place. Like, did a friend go missing, or is it your birthday and you're celebrating at this location while it's open? Do you work there? Do you work for another like company that's interested in Fazbear? Like, do you work with the police force or the FBI? Because those are actually roles you can have. It's honestly pretty fun. Yeah, just stuff like that. It's a fun system. I do recommend it. It's pretty cool. There are a lot of things that we did. Like, I believe in my first campaign, one of my friends he tried to activate he he tried to activate the springlock suit of William Afton by reaching into his pants and then trying to activate it. But all he ended up was just like springlocking his own hand. So that kind of backfired. But he did eventually get defeated by the group. So I will say, combat is brutal if you decide to go full combat, and you just got to make it clear to your guys that someone's probably gonna die. Yeah, like this system is brutal. Someone is probably gonna die, and yeah, that's about it. See ya.